Hi, everyone. Looks like we have people joining us. We're going to give just another minute or so for folks to jump in, and then we'll get started. Thank you. Great. Let's go ahead and get started. Like I said, thanks everyone for joining us today. We're excited to go through this session with you. Just a couple of housekeeping items. First off, wanted to let everyone know that this session is being recorded and it will be sent out in the coming days, so you can look forward to that. Additionally, if you have any questions that come up throughout this session, please feel free to put those in the Q&A portion of Zoom. We should have some time at the end to get those answered, and there's some folks on the call that will help answer throughout as well. So without further ado, I will pass it over to Sam Morris, who will be going through our content today.
Thanks, Taylor. Thank you all for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Great. Well, hi, everybody. My name is Sam Morris. I am a TAM at GitLab, and I'm coming at you from Orlando, Florida. I am presenting on GitLab administration on our SaaS platform and what that looks like. So welcome, and I hope you enjoy the content. First off, kicking it off with an agenda and the expected audience for the content. So overall topics of today's session, we're going to give an overview of what SaaS is in GitLab SaaS, comparison with our self-managed platform, which is our other offering, general licensing items, as well as the bulk of the presentation, which will be on permissions, roles, access, visibility, auditing, audit logs, and add-ons to your SaaS instance. The general audience for today are folks, you all who are employees of companies that are using GitLab SaaS, and perhaps you've been tasked with like an administrative role and you're not quite sure how to do that on our platform. So we'll give you some good starting tips of getting kicked off, or general refresher points as well. Out of scope for today's session is going to be detailed user provisioning, so your SSO setup, or if you're using Okta or something like that, that's going to be outside of the scope for today, but we're going to go over mostly more on the permissions, access, roles, and project subgroups, all that jazz. So first off, I just want to kick off real quick for what is GitLab in general. GitLab is the single DevOps platform. We're a DevOps lifecycle tool that encompasses your entire SDLC. So from source code management, Git repos, et cetera, to planning and tracking the progress of your projects, to CI/CD for building and testing and delivering your applications, to an open source community where you can contribute to GitLab as a platform. So we are one platform that encompasses many different facets of the software development lifecycle. So kind of taking it to what is GitLab SaaS then, and GitLab.com, and what does all this mean? So GitLab SaaS is our software as a service offering, and it is available at GitLab.com. It's comprised of a few different facets. Our main building blocks of SaaS are the namespace. That's like the unique name for your group or your subgroup or your project, where a project can be created. So if you go to any GitLab.com/, you'll see the namespace for a subgroup or a group where you can create your projects. The groups are used to manage projects and their permissions. So they're essentially collections of projects. Subgroups are groups within groups, and they allow for separating your organization at different visibility levels. So they're extremely powerful in kind of not just nesting everything under one group. You can have different access levels, et cetera. So the projects are those single units of code, your code base. They help you plan your work, where you do all your merge requests and your feature building. You can collaborate with your teams and continuously build, test, and deploy your applications at the project level. Finally, users, those are individual accounts through GitLab.com, and they can be members of groups and projects. So kind of diving into like the pros of GitLab SaaS, the infrastructure is entirely managed by GitLab. So you don't have to install any, you don't necessarily have to install your own runners. You can use shared runners for your jobs. You don't have to set up HA, Geo, et cetera. It's all completely managed by our engineers at GitLab. Also, your versions are upgraded automatically. So we just released 15.0, for example. This is, updated automatically every month. You don't need to patch your instances. You're always going to have the most secure version of GitLab. The recovery is also managed by GitLab. So in terms of backups and such, you don't have to manage that. You make sure that your data is safe and secure, it doesn't go anywhere. You don't have to worry about your backups. And finally, there's no barrier to entry. You just have to pick the subscription level that you want or the license tier that you want and the number of seats that are required as well. So there is no setup required. You just sign up and get started. So if we compare SaaS versus self-managed, there are some key differences in making this choice and also knowing what your limitations are and your advantages are. Specifically, again, around SaaS, the infrastructure is managed by GitLab in terms of high availability, instance level backups and recovery is all managed by us. However, if you're on self-managed, you can be, you can use kind of whatever you want for your overall infrastructure. Reporting and your DevOps adoption reports do look different across SaaS and self-managed. Essentially, you can only see the group and project level adoption, and any reporting is only going to be at that top level group or subgroup or project level. You can't see an instance level view because you don't really have an instance on GitLab SaaS. Again, instance-wide settings. So any setting for users is going to be the same across the board for SaaS. You don't have those custom settings across an instance. Access controls. So in this case, if as a customer, you are a group owner versus an admin. So this is very important to remember that you are not technically called an admin on GitLab SaaS, you're called an owner across the board. So you don't necessarily have those same admin privileges, which affects things like, using certain APIs that we offer. You need to have administrative access, which you don't have on GitLab SaaS. Feature availability. In the case of SaaS, SAML SSO is on premium, and for self-managed, SAML or LDAP is free. So different strokes. And finally, log information auditing. You have a lot less visibility into auditing and logs on SaaS, but you have a lot more unrestricted access on self-managed. So there is an initiative to kind of have feature parity between SaaS and self-managed. This is something called GitLab Workspace. It is very much in the early stages. However, it's trying to achieve a top-level namespace where you can manage applying settings across all your projects and groups, aggregating data across groups and projects. So it's just kind of a different way of managing your data on SaaS. And the idea is to move your admin area functions to groups and also have a hardware control section for self-managed instances. So generally across the board with all development at GitLab, we try to make things work for GitLab SaaS and have that kind of trickle down into the self-managed so that we're not building for two different architectures. So in general, we're trying to move into this workspace phase where you can have a little more of that high level control, but that is very early on in the process. However, it is in our roadmap. So important to talk about support when things go wrong, right? And what our logistics look like. So in terms of SaaS, our upgrade schedule is that we release the 22nd of each month. However, SaaS is upgraded more frequently than those, minor releases and major releases that come out. Minor in the case every month, major every year. You can't block a SaaS upgrade from happening. You can't prevent a software update, essentially. However, you are the first to get patched in the case of any security updates, any major ... right? Like large patches, those will immediately get applied to you. So you're always on the latest version of GitLab. In terms of the recovery and backups, this is important to a lot of customers, knowing when is everything getting backed up, how and where. Our production databases are backed up every 24 hours with continuous incremental data at 60-second intervals, so pretty frequently, and they're streamed into Google Container Service. The backups are encrypted, so your data is always secure, and they follow the lifecycle shown here on the screen. Snapshots of our file systems are taken every 4 hours, which primarily contains your repo data, but also has some other data as well. And these snapshots are retained for 30 days. And we do promise that 99.999999999% durability for our backups. So your data is definitely secure, but it's good to know the details when you're not managing this yourself. Let's talk about support. Very important. Again, if you don't have access to those logs to triage issues on your own, you're going to want to know how to interact with GitLab support and what the tiers are. So here are our tiers. Generally, any paying customer is on a premium or ultimate plan, and both have priority support. So these are different reply times and SLAs based on the support impact and the severity of the ticket opened. However, you do have access to those SLAs, and support engineers will get back to you on any issues that you may have. Here are some of those. So in the case of an emergency, you do have a 30-minute response time SLA, right? Not time to fixing the issue, but at least a response time, 24/7. However, this is a little bit tricky with SaaS because technically it's implying that your instance is completely unusable or unstable. Since you're not on a self-managed instance, it's hard to define what that looks like. Because if GitLab.com itself is down, which you would be on GitLab.com, obviously you will be getting that emergency support because many other customers and users are affected as well. However, if you have other issues that are completely degrading, your performance, you can always open a ticket. Generally, you will open a highly degraded, important features unavailable, slow, etc. Ticket, and you do get a SLA of 4 hours on that during the 24/5 schedule. So like I said, well, what happens if GitLab.com itself is down or any other facet of it? We do track the status of GitLab.com at status.gitlab.com, which tells you if anything is not operational. And it goes past just the website of GitLab.com. It also tells you, API status, Git operations, many other facets. Even I think our wikis are tracked in terms of their operational status. If you just check that out, you can see that you are able to see the status of everything related to our .com service. You can also subscribe to updates via email. So if you're an administrator for your company, you might want to subscribe to an email list so that you can get the latest updates of anything going down. Or you can also configure a webhook that posts a JSON payload to any URL, and you can configure Slack updates. So if anything goes down, you get notified on Slack. If you have a support Slack within your company, there is a lot of options for subscribing to updates on the status of GitLab. Let's jump into the licensing. I've gotten questions about this before. You cannot mix and match your SaaS license, right? So you pick, if you are a premium customer, all of your users in your namespace are at the premium tier. So you can't mix and match the tier levels, get a couple people on Ultimate, a couple people on Premium. It's not quite how it works. It's across your whole namespace, right? So you can't have a separate SaaS-like instance necessarily if you have a namespace that is a premium one. You pay for the subscription according to the maximum number of users assigned to that top level group. You can add or remove your users during your subscription period, but as long as that users doesn't go past the total number that you're allotted in that given time, it shouldn't exceed the subscription count. So it's important to know who counts as a user, right? This affects kind of, if you're going over in your licenses, that is very important to know. And then you can do, license cleanup or user cleanup to mitigate those issues. Every user is counted in the seat usage, something that you can also track within GitLab as well, including users who are pending approval. If they have a guest role, or never mind, except with a few exceptions. So if users are pending approval into a group or project, those users do not count toward your license. If you have a guest role in Ultimate, Ultimate allows for unlimited free guest users. So you do not need to worry about those in your seat usage. Any service account that is created or any bot users for projects or groups, none of those will be contributed to your overall seat usage. And you can also monitor that as well in the settings screen, settings usage quotas seats, to make sure that you're not going over, you don't have people being added to projects and they are no longer, necessary there. You can manage your users from there and see who's taking up a license seat. If you have any questions about that, you can reach out to your account team, specifically a strategic account leader or an account executive at GitLab, and they'll sort that out for you. So let's get into the bulk of our talk. How does administration work? GitLab SaaS, and what does it mean to be an admin on GitLab.com? Again, you're not going to be called an admin on GitLab.com. Only if you're on a self-managed instance do you have a literal admin role, right? So if you see that anywhere in our documentation, that might not apply to you because you're not on a self-managed instance of GitLab. Instead, though, you can have a role in a group, and that you could be a maintainer or more likely an owner. So the owner role is very similar to an admin in capability and function on GitLab SaaS. Important to know, administrators can do quite a lot on the GitLab instance. They can impersonate users. So I could say that I'm someone else doing something on self-managed, can't do that on SaaS. You can revoke access tokens on self-managed that are created and view if they're created. You cannot do that on SaaS. And any GitLab APIs that require you to be an administrator, for example, the API that allows you to revoke an access token, that is not able to be done on SaaS. So you do have certain controls that are not necessarily available to you. It's important to note that. Creating users. So, if you've set up GitLab, you need to create users, you need to add folks. You can invite users by email, or you can have them create their own accounts for GitLab.com and add them directly to your groups. You can also set up your skim provisioning, Okta, Azure, etc. We have some documentation on how to do that. But generally, you just have to focus on users as accounts that are not managed by you, kind of like, let's say you create an account, with your email, etc. I can't control the account you create, but I can add you to certain projects and groups. So that's more of your role as an administrator here on GitLab SaaS. So if you can't control exactly the user account, you can control the permissions and the roles that they have and what they can do in your corporation's projects and groups. So let's dive into the different types of roles. First off is the guest role. So guests are not contributors to private projects. They're not, pushing code. They're not contributing to anything specific. They can see and they can leave comments on issues. That is pretty much it. And GitLab Ultimate does provide those free guest users. So that's a really great option for folks who don't need so much visibility into a project, but they do want to be members of it. Reporters are read-only contributors. So they can write to issues, they can create issues, but they can't make commits to the source code of the repository. So it's good for folks who are not, contributing code, but again, need a little more visibility than at guest level. Developers are typically the lowest level that are used in projects because they are the direct contributors. They have access to everything that allows them to go from ideation to production within a project, unless something has been explicitly restricted by an owner, such as, protecting a branch. They can't push to main directly if the main branch was protected, etc. So there's certain things that they cannot do, but they can be productive and do their jobs as developers with the developer role. The maintainers are the super developers. So they could push to the main branch if they wanted to and deploy to production. And this is often a role that is held by a manager or someone who's kind of owning a whole project and can have that higher level of trust. Finally, the owners, which will be probably you all, They are the group admins, so they handle the groups, projects, subgroups. They can give access to groups directly, and they do have some destructive capabilities, which we will get into. So important to understand kind of how permissions work across, both the groups and then the projects. If a user is a member of a project and the project's parent group, the higher permission level is taken into account for the project. So these permissions only go higher as they go deeper into the hierarchy, which we'll visualize shortly because it's a little bit tricky to understand what's being explained verbally, right? But if you're a developer in a group, you can be a developer, a maintainer, or an owner, but not a reporter or something lower than a developer within a project in that group. So again, these permissions can only go higher or greater than or equal to what you have in that group level. However, if you're an owner in a group, you can only be an owner in all subgroups and projects. So once you're an owner, as you go deeper into the tiers, you are kind of an owner for everything. If a user is a member of a project, but not of the parent groups, they can still view the groups and their entities. So, you're not necessarily in the parent group, but you could still see an epic that might contain information from your project at that group level. So our general recommendation, because folks ask, what do I do with this in terms of setting up, my permission hierarchy as you're getting started? You want to use that principle of least privilege, right? So the higher up you are, that top level group, your overall GitLab group, let's say, you start with that lower permission and then you increase it at the deeper levels. So maybe I'm a, reporter at the highest level group, but in some lower levels, I am a developer, and maybe even at some subgroups, I am a maintainer or even an owner. So we generally recommend that principle of least privilege across the board. And that ties in nicely to permissions only going higher as you go deeper into the tree. So you're probably wondering, okay, well, maybe I messed up along the way, right? How do I update the member permissions once they've been set? So when you're an owner, you can update group or project permissions. However, as a maintainer, you can only update the project permissions. So that's important to note. As an owner in a top level group, you can adjust the maximum role in a dropdown. If you look at the list of members in the project, you can adjust the role, or you can invite members directly into that group and ask them to be a certain level of permission. So someone might directly invite me as Sam as a maintainer, something like that. Again, same with the subgroup level, same with the project level, adjusting that max role dropdown or inviting directly. And we should note that an owner can only invite up to owner access in a group and maintainer in a project. So I can't make someone an owner of a project. You can only be an owner in a group. Maintainer, you can add someone to a project. I can't add them to a group or a subgroup, but I can add them to my project as a maintainer and proceed the same way with the maximum role dropdown or inviting them directly into the project. And a maintainer can invite up to maintainer access in a project. So I could not invite someone to be an owner, right, or something higher than that. And only owners and maintainers can actually update group or project permissions. So as a developer, I would not be able to update someone's permission level. I have to have at least that maintainer access to do that. And the maximum role dropdown is only enabled for direct memberships. So if I did not directly invite you to a project, that dropdown is not going to be accessible. I'd have to directly invite you by email or your GitLab username, and then that max role dropdown would be enabled. So kind of see what that looks like shortly. Here's the visualization, right? So this is me. I am Sam. I am a developer at a top level group for some organization, and I am a member of subgroup 1. I inherited the developer permission from that top level group. And within subgroup 1, there are 2 immediate things I can see, which is subgroup 2 and project B. So let's dive into subgroup 2. I am a maintainer in subgroup 2 because I was added directly as a maintainer. And within subgroup 2, there is one project A where I am a maintainer, which I inherited from subgroup 2. So you can kind of see that the only way my permission level changed was that I was directly invited at a higher level of permission, which in this case, maintainer is higher than developer. Everything makes sense. However, I'm still just a developer in project B because I inherited that from my top level group. So it's important to note that I inherited the top level group permission and not from subgroup 1. So it would show up as me inheriting from top level group because nothing changed between top level group and my inherited permission and subgroup 1. So it's smart and knows that I was a developer all the way at top level group, and that hasn't changed. It just propagated down to project B. So let's see what that looks like in GitLab.com and not just in a diagram. So here I am. I'm Sam. I was added as a direct member, as a developer here, to the top level group, Sam top level group, by this owner who is also me, but we're going to be looking at this top user here. And you can see that as an owner, I believe I'm logged in as the owner here. I could remove the developer Sam from this group if I wanted to, but I don't want to. So you can see the developer permission trickles into subgroup 1. So if I dive from Sam top level group into subgroup 1 and look at the group members, I can see that I am still a developer in my maximum role. I can't adjust in the dropdown here because I inherited this permission from top level group. And it shows my access was granted 1 minute ago in this case by, it's a little confusing because they're both Sam Morris, but it was, I was granted by the owner, Sam Morris, who gave me access to subgroup 1. So you can see that my developer permission stays the same all the way from the top level group into project C. So now I am inside a project. I am no longer in a group. You can see project members right here. And I'm still a developer, and my source is still top level group as nothing has changed from then. I'm still listed as a developer. However, I was directly added as a maintainer to subgroup 2. So now we're in subgroup 2 within the top level group. And you can see that the source changed from Sam top level group to direct member. So someone directly added me. You can see when the access was granted and by whom. And then this maximum role drop down is here. So I can only see this max role drop down because I'm logged into my owner account, and I could adjust it here to a different level of access. And you can see that I inherited my maintainer permission from subgroup 2. So since that was changed to maintainer, I can now see it within project A here that I am a maintainer, and that the source has changed to subgroup 1, and within subgroup 1, subgroup 2, I was changed to a maintainer previously, and now I propagated down into project A's role. So how do we add and change owners of a group, right? So let's say, you want to make someone into an owner, they want that same administrative permission that you might have. That is possible. You're onboarding a new admin, you need them to have the owner permission role. How do we do this? Owners can only be added at the group level. So they can't be added at the project level, only at the group or subgroup level. And once an owner is made an owner, they cannot modify their membership in projects or be reinvited to the project as anything lower than an owner. So again, you will stay an owner and you can't change your permission level. Even as an owner, you will only be an owner of any projects and groups once you are added to the top level group as an owner. So at the group level, an owner can leave or decrease the membership of a different owner, but they cannot adjust their own membership in the projects. And this new permission will trickle down into subgroups and projects. So at the group level, you can change it, but you can't change it at the project level. At the project level, you can leave the project, right? So you're no longer a member of the project, but you couldn't have decreased your membership there. You just have to leave So group level, leave or decrease, project level, leave the project. What happens if you accidentally made someone an owner in a group? That could be pretty catastrophic, right? Owners can transfer namespaces, they can delete projects, right? So, there's a lot of power as an owner. So you want to be able to switch that back. So if you make someone an owner in a group, they become an owner of all those subgroups and projects. So you can just switch them back to that original permission level at the group level, and then the previous permissions will actually restore, including any direct memberships versus inherited memberships. So you won't have to go back through and check all your audit logs of what were they before, right? That would be pretty difficult to trace. So thankfully, you just go back to that group and you switch their membership back to what it was, and the permissions will restore from there pretty cleanly. Let's get into user management on SaaS. Some customers ask how to identify inactive users, right? Which would be super helpful, especially if you are trying to, clean up the number of licensed seats you're consuming. You want to know if people aren't active in GitLab SaaS, right? For your projects and your groups specifically. So unfortunately, there is no automated way to do this on GitLab.com. Because again, you want to think of a user as a member that could be a member of any project or group on GitLab.com. You could be a member of GitLab's group. You can be a member of your company's group, right? So, there isn't really a clean way to kind of track what you're a member of, right? Because you're just a user across an entire SaaS platform. So there's no automated way to do this. You can retrieve the last activity on field for namespace members via the billable members API. That is a possibility for seeing the last activity on field. In the UI, you can sort the list of users in a group by their last activity. But again, this is generic and it's activity across any group or project on GitLab.com. So if I had my own personal projects I was doing or my own sandbox stuff, you would see that last activity on and not necessarily the last activity in that project or group, right? So still not a foolproof approach unless you can guarantee that these users are not anywhere else on .com. You can also review the group information and activity to see who is interacting with any issue, project, epic, or subgroup in the group and decide who to remove from there. It's probably your best approach if you want to just see who's active, but it doesn't tell you who is inactive. It just kind of shows that they weren't active in recent history, right? But you can go through and see the activity across your projects and groups by checking group information and then the activity section. Also, how can you prevent users from being added at higher levels, right? Because obviously it's great, principal least privilege. We want to be able to add people at higher levels. So there are restrictions in who can grant what permission. Again, so an owner can manage permissions at the group level, and only owners can make other owners at the group level. So there is some, access control in a sense that you don't want to give people owner permission, but you can revoke it as an owner. But, there are restrictions on who can kind of do what. So that does help. Owners and maintainers can manage memberships at the project level. So again, you would not be giving people owner or maintainer privileges unless you knew that they were, good to add users at certain permission levels, at maintainer or even owner levels of things. And once a user is a member of a group or project, they can have their permission level modified to be the same or higher level. But you can prevent a user from automatically inheriting permissions from a group by adding them as a minimal access user so that these permissions don't propagate into the subgroups and projects within that group. So that is an option to add a user as a minimal access user. So in terms of visibility and access control, so what does the visibility mean on .com? Generally, we only have two permission or visibility levels, including public and private visibility. So it is unlikely any of you will be making public projects, but it is good to know that it is an option and what it entails. So public projects are projects that can be cloned without any authentication, and they're visible to all GitLab.com users, even when they're not signed into an account. And anyone is at least a guest in a public project. So those are unlikely for corporations. However, good to know what a public project is. You pretty much never want to set a project or group to public. And then private projects are cloned and viewed only by project members except guests. So guests cannot clone or view projects. However, if you are any level above that, you do have somewhat of a power if you are added directly to a private group or a private project. So generally you want to keep everything private. So another topic here is, what does audit trails look like with SaaS when you don't have access to the infrastructure, you don't have access to those detailed logs? What do you have? So on the premium and ultimate tier, which many customers are on, you do have access to audit events, which are super robust and very helpful. So audit events can help you see if a permission level has changed. And when you click on the audit event, you can see the author of the change. So who changed someone's permission level, what the action exactly was, the target or whose permission changed, the IP address where this change occurred, and the date. So here's an example. Someone changed access level from maintainer to owner with expiry remaining unchanged at never expires. So it can tell you the expiry date that they might have set, the actual permission level that the person was at to what they are now, and who authored the change. This is very helpful in terms of auditing and making sure that there are no bad actors who are changing people's permission levels to something higher, which again, we do have some restrictions on, but things happen. You want to be prepared for that logging. So this is the audit event that's available to you. There's also a lot of other audit events that are useful. So I listed some here. You can see if a project was created, if it was deleted, which only owners can do, but good to know. If it was renamed or moved to a different path, you can see if a user was added to a project and at what permissions. Again, permissions changing for a user. If a user was removed from a project, so if you recall earlier, I could have clicked like remove member and take someone out of a group or a project, right? But you have an audit event that tracks if that occurs. If a project export was downloaded, so you can export projects to many different formats, to say like a just .zip. You can see if an export was downloaded by someone, which might be a bad actor or a malicious person trying to download code bases. We have restrictions on that. That's something that you can track. Also, two-factor authentication enforcement, or if the grace period has changed for that. So we highly recommend setting up multi-factor authentication. So there's an audit event if a project or group set up that or made it a requirement to set up 2FA. And also you can change the grace period by which someone has to sign up. So you can check if that has changed and to what with an audit event. And we have both project and group audit events. So you can take a look at those and see what info is available to you. We also have APIs where you can interact with these audit events as well, which is my next slide. So how do we automate this? How do we check when things are happening? I don't necessarily want to go into the UI and be the audit event. Fair enough. So the audit event API and streaming are two features that you can consider. The API allows you to retrieve all as well as specific group and project audit events. So if you run a script that's checking for certain events, you can do that. There's a lot of ways you can leverage the API calls. So in the case of project events, maintainers and above can retrieve project audit events for all users. And developers can retrieve audit events based on their own actions. If I was a developer, I couldn't see everything, but I could see my own audit events. If I changed the permission of someone, if I, did something within my, well, I guess I couldn't if I was a developer, but if I did anything that an audit event would track, I could see it for myself. A maintainer could see for everybody. Similar with a group, only owners can retrieve group audit events for all users, and developers and maintainers can retrieve audit events based on their individual actions. So again, you can see what you're doing, but can't see everything. Audit event streaming. So this is only for Ultimate customers. However, if you are an Ultimate customer, available to you. So the event streaming allows owners at the top level groups to set HTTP endpoint to receive all audit events about a group, its subgroups, and its projects as a structured JSON. So if you want to stream your events, you can configure that, but you do have to be on the ultimate tier for that. So finally, we're going to get into some SaaS add-ons, right? Including CI and CD minutes. So I've had a few customers run into this where, they went past their allotted number of CI/CD minutes. So you can pay $10 for an additional 10,000 minutes. You just need a credit card. You can pay for extra minutes to run your jobs. The CI/CD minutes are the execution time for your pipelines on GitLab shared runners. So if you're using our infrastructure for your runners, you can use your own self-managed runners, set them up wherever. However, if you're using our shared ones, you will need to stay within a certain limit of minutes. You can buy more. And these purchases are one time. They don't renew annually or anything like that. It's just, as needed, ad hoc, you can buy some extra minutes for your jobs. You can also purchase additional storage. So it's $60 per 10 gigabytes of storage. And you can kind of check if you need to do that by looking at your usage quotas within your group. So you just go in your group and then you check your settings, usage quotas, storage, and then you can purchase more storage from there. The storage subscriptions do renew automatically. So I believe it's annually. You will be charged again if you added the 10 or more gigabytes of storage. So it's not the one-time purchase like the CI/CD minutes. But if you need more infrastructure, you can pay for it, is the important note here, just an additional cost. So that's it for administration on GitLab SaaS. Thanks for your time today, and I'll pause for any questions.
Great, thank you, Sam. Before we jump into the questions, which we do have a few, I'm going to pop open a poll right now. Would love to get feedback from all of you on how today's session went. It's just a couple questions, so if you take a minute to answer that, that'd be great. And from there, we will jump into some Q&A. So Sam, the first question that came in here, is there a way to add users to a group without automatically adding them to other projects or subgroups?
Yes, there is a way to do that. So if you add a user as minimal access, that is kind of the trick for not adding them automatically into subgroups and projects underneath a group. So they won't inherit those permissions. You can just add them directly. That's kind of like a terminal permission. Great.
Next one we have here, how do I access the admin panel on GitLab.com?
Yeah, definitely. So the admin panel or admin area is a great feature. It's on our self-managed offering. So if you want to access that, you can do so on a self-managed instance. However, it's not something that's available on GitLab.com. So, in that case, you have to manage, permissions and roles from the groups and projects, and you can't access a direct admin area, but hopefully GitLab Workspace will kind of cover that once we start achieving the parity between SaaS and self-managed, and you'll have those admin area functionalities on SaaS. But for now, it's not possible.
Okay. Last one I'm seeing here. What is a good role for someone who doesn't need access to the code base, more of an executive type?
Yeah, so generally we recommend a reporter level access for that, so that you don't have to be, contributing code or viewing it. You can just leave comments on issues, especially to track progress of things. We do have a good mapping between the permissions and roles and the actual roles within a business, like what a business analyst would need, what an executive would need. So generally our guidance for if someone doesn't need to be hands on keyboard or developing anything, it could be set as a reporter.
Great. Thank you, Sam. Well, with that, I think we'll wrap up now. I appreciate everyone's time today. As I mentioned at the beginning, keep an eye out for the recording and the deck. We'll be sending that out in the next day or two. And keep an eye out for future sessions like this. We're glad you joined us today. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.